Let's go and talk to Leonard, who's in Slough. Actually, before we do, just to remind you, if you've just tuned in, you can watch us at lbc.co.uk. It's quite interesting watching the interaction between these four tonight, I have to say.
More interesting than Labour hustings?
I'm not saying. Leonard, what would you like to ask our four panellists?
They just bitched.
Yes, to the panelists, can you tell us something about you and your background, which would show that you are in touch with everyday Londoners?
Andrew Boff.
I'm in touch with them. I'm born in a council house and lived in London. I think the maximum time I've lived outside of London was 5 weeks when I got a bar job in Scotland. Otherwise I've been in London all my life. I seem to be gradually moving east. I started off in Hillingdon, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's as far west as in London before they start speaking Welsh. And then I'm gradually moved east, and probably in a few years' time I'll end up in Southend. But I live in Barking at the moment.
So the Mayor of London moves to Southend. It's not a great head.
It's not good, yeah. But if you remember, Side, my policy is to change the boundaries of London as well. So Southend will end up there.
Goodness.
So don't you worry.
Zach Goldsmith.
So I'm. You want my background? I have a very fortunate background for many different respects. I don't tick the minority boxes in that sense. I have been in ethnic sense, or in any other sense, in fact. I have been an MP for the last 5 years, and before I was elected as an MP, I was asked this question a lot because of my background, because I have a privileged background. And a lot of constituents or future constituents asked me exactly that question: why would you be good at representing this area? You have not struggled in this manner or that manner, or whatever the issue was that was raised. And my argument is that to be an effective politician, whether that's an MP or a councillor or as a mayor, you need to be someone who gets things done, who solves problems, and who cares about solving those problems. And I have demonstrated, I hope, over the last 5 years, that whether people are on the left, the right, the centre, no matter what their circumstances, I've been a champion for my community for the last 5 years. And that is reflected, I think, in a huge swing towards me in the last election, where it's gone from being a cosy Lib Dem seat to being the safest Conservative seat in the city. That's a reflection, I think, of the work that I've done in my constituency.
Someone said to me the other day that they can quite imagine you representing the good citizens of West London. They can less easily imagine you representing people where Andrew lives in Barking.
I totally disagree with that. And I have spent time and worked in and campaigned in, I think, every borough in London, not just in the last month, but for over a long period of time. That the problems and the pressures that people face vary between borough, from borough to borough, but there is a thread that runs through all of them. So if you go to Barnet, for example, as I go as a Richmond Park and North Kingston MP and talk to people in Barnet about the issues, it's the same questions, the same concerns. If you go to Hackney, similar issues, similar concerns, not identical, obviously, it's not an outer borough, but there are issues there which are common to everyone. Cost of living, housing crisis, fear of crime, a worry about what the huge cuts to come is going to do to the safety of our streets. All these issues are Richmond issues, they're Barnet issues, they're Hackney issues, they're Tower Hamlets issues.
Right. Saeed Kamal.
Well, I'm a Londoner. I was born and bred in London. I know what it's like to have to save for a deposit on your first home while watching most of your money go out in rent. I know what it's like to go to your local train station in the morning and not get on the first train, have to wait for the second train or the third train. I know what it's like to report a crime and no one seems interested. Those are the experiences of real Londoners. And I actually think that people are voting for a mayor of London want someone who understands their experience. But they also want to be inspired. They also want to understand the London story. My dad came to Britain in the 1950s. He worked on the railways, worked on the buses, and he used to say to me, there's no limit to what you can achieve if you believe in yourself and work hard. And he used to say to me, son, I don't want you to work for London Transport. I want you to run London Transport. And I said to him the other day when I was talking to him, I said, you do realise, Dad, when I become mayor, I'm going to be the boss of the man or the woman who runs London Transport. That's a fantastic London story.
And he said, I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
No, he said, that's an inspirational story. Go and tell Ian Dale and tell his listeners that that's a London story.
Well, hello to Saeed's dad. Stephen Greenhalgh, what would you like to say in response to Leonard?
Well, London is a huge engine of opportunity, and I'm the son of a state school teacher, and my father worked all his life in one of London's big hospitals in the NHS, and they had to work hard. They gave me a great education, and certainly I've had the kind of things that they could only dream of, and that's what cities do. You give each generation that bit more, and my kids have a huge amount going for them, and that's what cities are all about. And And I have to say that in this job, I know what it's like to set up a business and fail and then try again. And I started that from my bedroom. It now employs over 30 people. And so when I go into politics, I go with a background of understanding what it's like to get something and make something from nothing.
What did you learn? You said you started a business and it failed. What did you learn from that?
That you try again. If you get knocked down, you get back up again. Yeah. Nothing's easy in life. But London is a huge opportunity to be able to succeed eventually if you persevere.
Lily Jane has just tweeted, I'd happily accept Zach Goldsmith into the Labour Party if the Tories don't like him. He's an amazing politician. So
thank you, Lily Jane.
There you go.
Don't tempt Andrew.
We'll have to balance that up with some tweets later. Right, let's go to George, who's in West London. Hello, George. What would you like to ask?
Well, I'm George Galloway, and I look forward to crossing short swords with at least one of the gentlemen there over the next few months. My question is this. I've lived in London almost 35 years. My experience with the Metropolitan Police has been invariably a positive one, but then I have blue eyes, a white face, and usually a white collar. I think all of the gentlemen there, if they're being honest, will accept that my experience, and possibly theirs, for the most part, has not been the experience of a large number of Londoners. Hundreds of thousands of Londoners regard the police almost as an occupying force. They believe that they are not being policed for, but that they themselves are being policed, that they are the victims of unfair policing. So I want to know which, whoever is the candidate on the Conservative side, should they be successful, what would they do about this perception that the Metropolitan Police is not for all Londoners?
Okay, George, thank you very much for that. Stephen Greenhalgh, you're the Deputy Mayor for Policing. I've got to come to you first on this.
Well, first of all, that's why Boris and I set a challenge for the Met, not just to cut crime. That's not enough. That we wanted to see that all of London's communities, our black, Asian and minority communities, have confidence in the Met Police, and we wanted to see that confidence rise. But let's pay some credit to this Mayor, because the number of officers from black, Asian and minority backgrounds has doubled since we introduced London-only recruitment. And obviously there's more to go, but we're around nearly 12% of the force now are minority officers, more female minority officers at very high ranks. There's more to be done, but let's recognise some of the progress. Let's also recognise that confidence has recovered from being absolutely at the floor in the wake of the riots. And we've got to come up with practical proposals to continue to engage with these communities that we have more work to do to build confidence.
Saeed Kamal.
Well, George, I guess that you won't be voting for any of us. Actually,
he's standing himself. So he's
exactly.
Vote for himself.
But actually, you can vote in the registry. You can vote in the internal selection process.
Okay. Answer the question.
Yes, of course, I'm going to do that. Look. Any large organisation will have a few rotten apples, or actually there'll be mistakes, and that's, I think, when confidence in the police falls, when there have been mistakes or there have been a few problems, and the police hasn't been seen to respond adequately. But let's be positive, as Stephen has said. Let's follow on from that. Most people, if there's a crime or there's a problem, the first people you will call will be the police, because actually most people have confidence. But I think what we've got to be quite clear about is where there are problems or where there are mistakes, the police have to be open with the public. Explain what happened, what went wrong, and assure the public why it won't happen again.
Do you feel that happens not often enough?
Well, I'll give you one case where people are still asking questions, and that was the murder of Jean-Charles Menezes, the innocent man in Stockwell. Actually, the story kept changing around the time he was shot. They were putting out stories that he jumped over the barriers, that he was Middle East appearance, that he had a jumper, he had something under his jumper. No one really knows what happened that day. And I think if we want to have confidence in the police, we've got to make sure that we get clear answers to that.
Zach Goldsmith.
Yeah. Hello, George. Nice speaking to you.
Hi, Zach.
Very well indeed. All the better for speaking to you.
Come on.
Sorry, it was a bit of a
talk down the clock,
cross-party handshaking. Look, I think Stephen has already said, and I think he also can take some credit for this as well. The look of the police in London is changing. There's been a not a dramatic, but there has been a shift in recruitment practices, so that the police are beginning to look more like the London that the police serve. That's principally from trying to recruit more from people from within London. London is naturally a very diverse place, and the more recruitment that happens within London as opposed to from outside of London, the more diverse the police will look, and that's an important thing. I also think I support the moves that we've seen in relation to stop and search. I wouldn't want to go any further, though. So there's been a big reduction in a number of... It's about 65% reduction in the amount of stop and search that's happening. I think that's right, Stephen. And yet the number of arrests that result from stop and search has shot up, hundreds of percent. And I think that it shows that it's a more targeted approach. But I wouldn't want to go further. It's a valuable tool for police.
Andrew Boff.
Hello, George. Well, last time we debated together, I think it was at the East London Mosque about 5 years ago when we were talking about similar issues. Well, the problem I have sometimes with the police is the inconsistency of the approach in different parts of London. And much as some boroughs and some police officers, the bulk, may I say, are very professional, there are problems with the consistency of that. And that is why, if you want to look at hashtag more local police, you'll see a commitment from me there to effectively abolish borough commands and concentrate the resources down on local police. We have to see a police force that looks more like London, and that's something I'm absolutely 100% committed to. But we can't do it with the current bureaucratic structure of the police force, which is very top. It's too bureaucratic.
All right, George Galloway, you've heard the answers there. They all seem to be ganging up on Zach Goldsmith a little bit in this debate so far. Have you got some comforting words for Zach?
Yeah.
Well, if I was voting in the Tory election, I'd be voting for Zach. I think he's an outstanding,
there's an endorsement,
honourable person. If you want a billionaire trust fund child as your mayor, you certainly couldn't get a better one. He's an outstanding person and an honourable person, but he knows nothing about the lives of the people up the Walworth Road, the people in Barking, the people in Bethnal Green, the people in Edmonton, in Tottenham, and so on. So
Blimey, thank God you're not backing me.
George, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your question. I'm not sure whether Zach will welcome that endorsement or not.
I'll keep the first part, if that's all right.
Fine. You'll edit that for a clip. Yeah. Right, let's go to another Ask Me Anything. It's Stephen Greenhalgh's turn. Andrew Boff, your question to Stephen, please.
Sorry, I've got to turn me a bit apart. Have you got an undertaking from government that they will not reduce TfL's grant if fares are cut?
No, I haven't got an undertaking from government.
That's interesting because the past few governments have all been committed to reducing the amount that's funded by the taxpayer and increasing the amount that's funded by funded through fares. If you were to cut fares substantially, the government would want to rake back some of that grant. That always has been the understanding, and without an undertaking from the government that they wouldn't do that, I don't see how you can make the pledge that you've made to reduce fares substantially.
And Andrew, you can make the pledge because TfL's an organisation that can be leaner and more efficient. With a land take that's greater than the London Borough of Camden, you know as well as I that most of that is stuff that you do not need to deliver public transport. Equally, there are huge back office savings, and we've got to have a mayoralty that is not going to continue to fleece the fare-paying public. So what Treasury want is an organisation that delivers value for the passenger, that recognises that a modest reduction in fares is actually the way to go and critical for the London to thrive.
But so what you're actually saying is that you want to keep fares down through flogging off assets.
Well, I was able to change a balance sheet for both the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham and the Met by making far better use of public land. And if you've got 1,000 acres you can develop, that raises 20-odd billion pounds.
Stephen, once you've sold all the assets, how are you going to keep the fares down?
Because it's not the only way. It buys you the time to reform an organisation that requires root and branch reform.
Right, Saeed Kamal.
Well, actually, Stephen, I was going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to ask you another question because I'm still sceptical that you say that you can cut the fares when we actually need investment, and I think all mayors in London are going to have to tackle that trade-off. But let me ask you a question. We've been rather unfair, or some have been unfair. Some of you have been unfair, not me, I hasten to add, on Zach and talking that he doesn't know anything about outside the area of Richmond. How about you? You're very well known in Hammersmith and Fulham. What do you know of the rest of London?
Well, first of all, I grew up in East machine, which happens to be in Zach's constituency. I understand, what it's like to live in the suburbs, but
that's kind of West London as well.
That's also in West London. My dad also worked in Hackney Hospital and spent time in the East as well. Because as a young doctor, you went and served in pretty much all the hospitals around London, and I had to follow him wherever he went. But that's not the point. The point is that in my role as deputy mayor, I'm one of the few people around this table that's held public meetings in all 32 London boroughs, not once but multiple times, and I take issue with you, and I normally want to agree with my with the point that you made. Actually, you introduced by saying there's somehow a link between what you spend and the quality of the services that you provide. Now, I discovered
there's a link between what you spend and what you raise.
No, well,
that's the link.
It was always a link between what you spend and what you raise. But exactly. The idea that as soon as you reduce the the burden on the fare payer that you suddenly have to cut investment, I totally reject, because what we discovered in local government and with the police, you can improve services by changing the way they deliver those public services.
Right, can I take objection to the question as well?
Pardon?
Am I allowed to object to the question as well?
You can object if you like.
It was hung on a reference to me, and I just think that the logic of that line of argument is actually a madness. It means that if you're a North Londoner, you can't represent the West or the South or East. If you're black, you can't represent white people. If you're white, you can't represent black people. If you're gay, you can't represent straight people. It is a nonsense, this. Actually, it's about the quality of the candidate. Have they got a vision? Can they deliver that vision? And whose side are they on? That's what it comes down to.
Do you feel a bit got at? Because it is a sign of things to come, isn't it, if you are the candidate?
Look, it's not a new question. As you it's a question.
But the Labour Party will chuck it even further than Andrew
and Londoners have the good sense to see through it. They understand.
Right.
Terrible.
Okay. I knew I shouldn't have provoked you. Zach, what's your question for Stephen?
So it's not my question. This is a question from Oliver, who asks, how will you involve young citizens in London's decision-making process? Good question.
Well, it is a good question, and what I don't think we do is solve that question by saying let's create a series of bureaucratic structures, parliaments, and ways that I think patronise young people. What we want to do is get them interested in current affairs. We want to get them interested in public life. We want to get schools to hold mock elections. We want to ensure that their interest in politics is deep-rooted and they debate the issues. And I think all of us have to then take part in whatever spare time we have to encourage those kind of debates. And that's why I'm chair of governors of 2 state schools, and that's the way forward.
Right, we only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to be a little bit shorter in some of your answers, particularly to maybe the next question or two. Taslim is in Richmond. Hello, Taslim. What's your question?
Hello, Ian. So far, I have to say the debate is great.
Good.
My question to the candidate, as I live and work in London, as an artist, is a struggle. But the problem that Londoners and all of us feel the same way is this continue the strike on the tube. So, as a candidate, I'm going to ask what they will do to stop the strike on tube.
Zach Goldsmith.
Hi, Taslim. So I should make the point, first of all, that there is stuff happening nationally which will make a big difference in relation to the tube strike. So there is legislation going through Parliament which will require the unions to have a much bigger mandate in order to be able to carry out these a strike. Now, as it happens, it wouldn't have prevented the strikes that we've seen recently, but it would have prevented the majority of strikes over the last 10 years. So that is something I certainly be backing that in Parliament, and I suspect the majority will. I think it'll go through, and that will change things. In terms of the negotiations, which is an issue that has come up a fair bit. In fact, I got into terrible trouble for making this point to Ian last time you interviewed me. I was harassed by people who said it was mad, but I haven't yet heard a good argument against making the negotiations between TfL and the unions more transparent, opening them up to public scrutiny. I think that TfL is on the right policy. I think Boris's idea is a good one. I think the TfL offer to the TfL staff to the drivers is a good offer, and I think the unions are making unreasonable demands. If it was open and transparent, people would see that, and I think the pressure would be on for everyone, all parties, to be much more reasonable than they're currently being.
First of all, we need to employ a pool of ex-tube drivers, so that when tube drivers decide to strike, that we can get somebody to actually drive the trains and break the strike.
Scabs,
no, I don't use that word. as we do in the fire service when there's a dispute in the fire service. Secondly, when I am mayor, I'll be going to Zach as the Member of Parliament there, one of the London Members of Parliament, and trying to persuade him that actually the tube is so incredibly vital to the London economy that we should actually ban strikes on just for that specific job. And it's £300 million a day is lost through strikes. And lastly, of course, we need to introduce driverless trains. For those people who travel on the DLR, you'll know that it's far less affected by industrial action than the main tube network, and I would aim to provide one line as driverless by 2020 and 3 lines driverless by 2024.
Stephen Greenhalgh, it was one of Boris Johnson's commitments to negotiate a no-strike agreement with the unions. He's never actually sat down with the unions. Would you make that pledge as well?
Well, I don't agree that the right way of achieving those kind of agreements is by negotiating them yourself as mayor. I wouldn't undermine the employer. You stand behind the employer. It doesn't mean you don't meet the unions. But I have to say that we do need the tightening up of this legislation. You even talk to people who work on the tube lines themselves, who provide the support services for the London public, and they're fed up with the drivers. They say actually they are paid to do this already. They shouldn't be asking for more money, and they want this to be. They're not supportive of a. Yeah. And what I discovered actually today was that these people, not only are they paid vast sums of money, they are also, on average, taking 15 days sick leave a year, which seems astronomically high for whites.
Saeed Kamal, short answer if you would.
Management issue.
Isn't it? Actually, I think one thing we've got to be quite clear about this answer. People seem to think that this idea of driverless trains will solve all the world's problems when it comes to strikes. You still need people on board, and actually even the DLR, the person on board drives 30% of the time, and particularly talking to TfL or London Underground, in the deep bore tunnels, they want someone on board because you just can't escape to another tunnel. And in the case of an emergency, as 7-7 or something like that. So you still have people on board and they still might go on strike. Yeah. So actually, for me, it's really interesting because I've been speaking to a number of people.
I think, Saeed, you talk to TfL too much.
We're running out of time here, Saeed.
What I would do, I would bash heads together, because sometimes what happens when they go to ACAS, the conciliation service, they don't actually talk to each other. They go to separate rooms.
So not trust them.
No, you say to the management and to the unions, get in that room, I'm locking the room until you make progress.
No. I have asked you not to interrupt because we're running out of time.
Bash heads together, that's the answer.
We've got to now go to Saeed Kamal's Ask Me Anything. Zach Goldsmith.
Thank you very much. So, Gray Gosling has asked, how will you vote in an EU referendum, in or out?
I've said quite clearly, if there was a referendum today, I probably would vote to leave. But actually, at the moment, what's great about it is David Cameron's trying to negotiate a new deal, very simply on the Eurozone versus non-Eurozone, an end to ever closer union, making sure that national parliaments have more power, more competitiveness. If he gets that deal, then I may well consider voting in. But actually, at the moment, I'm more likely to.
Well, let's just quickly answer the other three. How would you vote?
100% agree with his answer. It was a gift to you,
Stephen.
Question.
Thank you.
Well, I want the reform so that we can stay in.
Okay, Andrew.
The vote probably today. I mean, it's election day, Saeed. You're there poised over the ballot paper.
I asked you your view, Andrew.
And
is your view coming in or out?
In or out? Absolutely
okay,
out.
Fine. What's your question for Saeed?
Oh, God, I've forgotten. What would the question be for your airport referendum?
Well, actually, I would prefer it to be, do you want a brand new airport privately funded, no taxpayer funded, in the Thames Estuary to meet future demand for the next 50 years?
You won't get that past the Electoral Commission.
And the Electoral Commission will probably... The Electoral Commission might say, do you want a new airport?
What if they said no? How would you then resolve the problems with air travel in the southeast?
The reason I've asked for a referendum, because I have sat down with high-level people who are behind the brand new airport and made sure...
Don't you think referendums are a way for government to get out their own political problems?
Let me ask the question.
It's an excuse
very quickly.
I've put together a consortium.
Andrew, please.
I'm about solutions. I've put together a consortium with the architects and with funders who can deliver this now.
Yeah, but that's how they're
and you
funded.
have to ask the Londoners whether they want that.
That's how they're funded.
Stephen.
Well, I've listened to your passion around social mobility. So my question is, what is the single most important thing that you would do as mayor to increase social mobility?
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Well, actually, I spend a lot of time going to schools and youth clubs, and I'm telling lots of kids in London, I'll say to them, you could all be me. Now, some of them may not want to be me, I don't think, but actually what I'm saying to them is it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter whether your family has been here for centuries or whether your family has been here for a few weeks. It doesn't matter whether you come from you're lucky to come from a privileged background or you come from a poor background. London is a city for everyone. There's no limit to what you can achieve if you believe in yourself and work hard.
So the most important thing you'd do is a pep talk to the kids?
And what I would do, I would make sure that I do that, but I would also support the thousands of fantastic projects in London. I'll give you one quick example. The Regenerate project on the Roehampton estate takes former drug dealers, former gang members, turns them into entrepreneurs.
Okay.
The new Addington job.
All right.
From City
Thank
Hall.
you. I want to get a couple of text questions in at the end because we're running out of time. Tamsin in Woolwich says, can everyone other than Zach just pull out as they're nobodies with no chance, just doing this to raise their profile and not actually win? Am I right, Stephen Greenhalgh?
No. I'm doing this because I believe that I have a plan for London, a plan that will be delivered, and politics is around delivery. And I'm someone with an experience of being able to deliver both in City Hall and in a town
Andrew?
hall.
I'm a nobody. I don't have a comment.
Okay. Saeed?
People said that to David Cameron when he was in a leadership election for the Conservative Party. He won. People said that to Obama and said Hillary's going to win it. Pull out.
You're comparing yourself to Obama?
Not at all. What I'm saying here is actually, sometimes early favourites do not win, and it's all down to the vote.
Zach, are they a bunch of nobodies?
I'm sure people were saying that about Jeremy Corbyn a couple of months ago. No, we're a strong field. I've always said that. I'd like the field to be bigger. It should be the full 7, but we're a strong field. Everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses.
What's the biggest? This is from Russell in Pimlico. What's the biggest donation your campaign has received, and from whom? Zach, has your family donated? Andrew?
2 pence.
Seriously?
2 pence.
Okay, Steve?
Well, I've had support from our family business that I set up.
How much?
50,000.
Okay. Saeed?
Zach's family hasn't donated anything to my campaign.
That's a good answer, but what's the real answer? What's your biggest donation?
To be honest, I don't know at the moment.
Donations. Well, this is now. I'm going to come across as a mother's boy. My mother has made a donation to my campaign, but you know what? If I can't persuade my mother, I'm not going to stand a chance with the rest of London.
That's what mothers are there for. Many would say.
Thank you to her.
How much was it, by the way?
It hasn't come through yet, so I can't tell you that. But I trusting my mother, it'll be a generous donation. I hope so.
Okay.
Got any spare change?
Let's. Are we going to have a quick final question from Marie? Let's go to Marie in Putney. Hello, Marie. What would you like to ask?
Hi. Well, best question left to the last. Shame we haven't got any time left.
Oh, we have got. Go on.
Well, yeah. What have been Boris Johnson's successes and failures? Has he been a good mayor? And does he show you the way as to how the job should be done?
Saeed Kamal.
What I think Boris has been fantastic about is, first of all, to get a good team, including Stephen, to tackle policing, for example, but also actually to make sure, the great thing about London, it constantly regenerates itself. Think about the Docklands, used to trade with the rest of the world, went into decline under a Conservative government, regenerated. Canary Wharf is now the world's Europe's second largest financial district. What he's been doing around tech, around East London, encouraging entrepreneurs in London to believe in London and London be a successful city. So actually what I would want to do is continue to...
Okay, what's Boris's worst failure?
Actually, I don't think he's had a worse failure, but we need to build more homes in London. We've built 200,000 over the last 10 years. I will make a pledge that I will double the number of homes being built every year.
Stephen Greenhalgh.
He's been a great mayor, and I think he's seen London rise to the very top of all world cities, and he's been able to attract that interest in London from around the world, and I think he's been able to do that without having all the big foreign embassies. That's a huge legacy. I don't see any, and he's also been able to deliver a lot of change without a lot of opposition. I mean, we've seen that in policing, we've seen that in other areas, and I'm very proud to be part of his team.
And a failure?
Well, I mean, I don't see that there's been a substantial failure at all. I think it's been
we're overrunning, obviously.
Pardon? Andrew? What would you say Boris's worst failure was?
Worst failure? You don't want me to applaud it? Okay.
Well,
the worst failure.
She wants an answer. The successes and failures. Yeah, simple as that.
You just want a failure off me, or do you want a success?
I'd like both, Andrew.
Oh, thank you very much. Right, is optimism and encouraging investment during the credit crunch. That absolutely was the biggest contribution. It will go down as the biggest failures. schemes like Mount Pleasant and 233 tower blocks, which is why, as mayor, I will effectively ban them. And if you want to sign up to that hashtag no more tower blocks.
I've asked Saeed. A journalist just tweeted in that your donation from your mother has actually been registered in the Register of Members' Interest. Do you want to know how much it is?
Yes, I do.
50 grand. So you're on a par with
Thank you
Stephen
very
there.
much.
So I'm glad to clear that. Thank you very much to all four of you. Andrew Boff, Stephen Greenhouse, Zach Goldsmith, Saeed Kamal. Hope you've enjoyed it.